Yeah, it's a bit of a complication at the moment because the Assembly of Experts is meeting. They haven't convened as yet, and they are mulling over five names, out of which one name you just mentioned. I don't think so, despite very strong credentials. Mojtaba Khamenei has a strong chance because there is an aversion to dynastic succession in Iran. But you cannot rule out under these very difficult times, they might make an exception, but otherwise it is against the teachings of his own father, Ali Khamenei, who was against this dynastic succession. Because this concept of vilayat faqih is all about selection of the best from amongst the assembly of experts. And President Trump, he also alluded to, albeit vaguely, about some individuals whom he was referring to as the preferred options, but who were all eliminated in the first strikes. So it's all very vague at the moment as to what he has in mind. I think the two situations have are not analogous. Venezuela was a different environment, and I think that that was an insider job also there. Uh, when the Maduro was captured through the collusion of his own, perhaps, elements in the army. But here it's a different environment where Pastarane Inqilab, army, and the whole hierarchy of clerics that is united behind their ideology also and their leadership also. And if anything, this attack by United States and Israel has further solidified their resolve. And it's become a bit complicated now because a Maduro thing might not be possible. There's a line of succession. They're very motivated people. They are very ideologically indoctrinated. And I don't think so. You can pull off another Venezuela here. There are effort to stoke an uprising in the peripheral areas. Kurds in the north, Khuzestan, Arabs, Balochis in the Sistan, Balochistan. But I think those efforts would all wither on the vine of impracticality because here there's a very large segment of Persian population which is solidly behind the current government despite contrarian voices. There is a strong Pastanane enclave hierarchy which is still very well motivated, ideologized, and they are cohering well. Under the stress, they have proclivity to cohere more, and there is a very strong network of Iranian police, which is called Basij, which is down to every town, small village level, which has roots in the population, and it's a very repressive and a very strongly regimented, control regime. So under those environments, the defections are, even if there are some, and I don't think so, those would gain much traction to give a countervailing force, which United States expects to rise up and cause the internal implosion. You cannot entirely rule out because Mossad has a very pervasive network all over the Middle East, even inside Iran, despite sanitization by the Iranian regime in last June, after last June attacks, there is still a network which is operating inside Iran. You must have experienced last time around once Aramco was attacked in the past. It was also a very mysterious attack as to who has, initiated that. So you can never rule out a false flag kind of an operation. But Iranians have responded, and Iranians drew the first blood. They uh, have hurled missiles against all the US bases, though Saudi Arabia has been spared the fury because the maximum brunt is being borne by UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia probably, I can surmise that it's because of the Pakistan's intercession and diplomacy, and also uh, Saudi Arabia's peace overtures before this standoff with Iran. You see, Kurds have a history, and they are in Syria, Iraq, Iran, and there are other countries which have very serious concerns. Even Turkey, which is a very strong ally and a NATO country, it has a memory of Kurdish uprising, and it doesn't see eye to eye with the US efforts to stoke insurgency through Kurds, even for short-term expedient political motives. So KTIP, which is operating which intends to operate in Iran through CIA help. Overtures are being made. A plan, obviously, CIA has so many plans, but it hasn't passed muster on the assent of president so far. And I think they don't have that ground presence, strength of numbers, and the arms training, because it requires a sedulously prepared and cultivated counter regime effort, which has not been done. So preparations have not been made, and if it is a late thought, I think that option might not redound to the advantage of Americans or Israelis at this point of time, because KDIP is no match to pass the Irani Inqilab and a very strong Iranian security apparatus. That's very intriguing because for a fleet review, one of the Iranian vessels that went and it took part in all the celebrations, also in all the events, and that was ceremoniously bid farewell from a Indian port, and yet the Indians could not even come to the rescue of that Iranian frigate. That leaves a lot of question marks on the Indian collusion or an ability to stand by their allies. So this is a lesson for Iran, because Indians definitely are in cahoots with Mossad, and their policy strategic congruence is an open secret, because we saw Modi just before this operation. He went, showed solidarity, spoke in the Israeli Knesset, and they exchanged their ideas. I believe they have a strategic congruence of interest vis-a-vis Iranian issue, and this leaves uh, Indians as one of the very unreliable, unpredictable partners. This is for all future allies to see. But the right for innocent passage is a guaranteed right in international waters for uh, naval vessel belonging to a country which has not shown the aggressive intent, because that was not on a combat patrol. The ship was coming from a neutral venue. And I think this raises a lot of questions of international law as well. I think at this point of time, mediatory efforts would be a function of American and Iranian assent to such efforts. And there are countries like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, China, which can play a very important part. And especially Pakistan, because of its very close ties with the Iranian leadership and its strong ties with the US leadership also, and the US military, can play a very important role, provided uh, willingness is shown by Iranians, because it will be only possible once those conditions are created. At this point of time, Americans are unleashing the fury of their ordnance on Iran with a view to ensure that they condition and attract them sufficiently to come to negotiating table from a position of weakness. I believe the maximalist demands of Israel of regime change and balkanization and the prolongation of the war are completely opposed to the US interest, because a protracted conflict is not in the US interest, whereas it in the interest of Israel, because Netanyahu wants to prolong this war for his electoral prospects. And there are pundits who are saying that he might like to prolong this till as far as June, when he calls for an election and brandishes this as a trophy for his political gains. But that would be very catastrophic for the entire region and even the protagonists in the conflict equation. So it leaves a workable solution that Iranians also consider ceasefire coming onto the negotiating table and acceding to those demands which they were already conceding in Vienna and in Geneva. And in the Vienna, it was expected that a deal would be clinched. So all those three demands were already almost conceded. There was some uh, negotiation going on, the capping of the ballistic missile ranges and all that. But I believe now things are a bit complicated as to what is that time frame and what is the conditioning stage where the adequate understanding would be reached to come to a negotiating table. I think it would be enhancement of it will be a function of the pain threshold, and then a collective decision by the Iranian leadership to preserve their remaining infrastructure and not to go for a complete destruction, which is in fact the aim of Israel. Iranians, unfortunately, they were so depleted that they had very little options. Their only option is an asymmetric warfare, a protracted conflict in which they dig their heels, they keep replying through their missile stockpile, and they have a production capacity of drones. They rely on these low-cost options. One of their drones, UCAV Shahid, costs 25 to 30,000. So, which is comparing to an interceptor of Patriot, which costs 4 million US dollars, is a low-cost option. So they normally use the tactics of swamping and deceiving the air defenses of the adversary, and then letting slip one odd ballistic missile and hypersonic missile for maximum effects on a worthwhile target. So this is their hope. They are relying on their underground launching sites now. Their Achilles heel is in they're launching mobile launchers of ballistic missiles, because Americans claim that in the first phase of attacks, nearly half of their ballistic missile launches were taken out. So, which leaves around 200, and out of those 200, they can spread out and maybe they can use it in phases incrementally, and in the process might rely on their own production facility of the low cost drones to keep fighting. Rest is their ground troops performance. So since there is no boots on ground, and in the last 100 years of modern warfare history, the lesson is that a conclusive regime change or a complete victory has not been clinched only on the basis of air war. In Serbia's case, once the US bombed, it was not only that bombing, but the decision of the Russians, which they still rue to this day, to pull their support from the Serbs on the request of Americans, that resulted to Serbs' capitulation. So this missile and air war is not going to be a conclusive victory for United States until and unless there are some boots on ground. Though the boots on grounds plan is also on the cards, but that is a very far-fetched idea so far. The US president has run into problems with its own Congress on the War Powers Resolution Act. But according to Title 51 of US law, the president can order limited number of boots on ground, just like they did in Afghanistan. But to what avail? Would that be enough? Would they be having a ground countervailing force in the shape of an ally like Kurds, which are ready to fight. That is not on the card. So, in the absence of that, if it comes to boots on grounds, then in asymmetric warfare tactics, considering the terrain difficulties and the motivation level of Iranian IRGC, uh, it's going to be a very long and dogged ground combat. But so far, Americans are not mulling over the idea of putting boots on ground because it has political costs. Once the body bags go back, there will be uh, pushback against the U.S. efforts, which is still, even in this at this moment, there are voices of dissent inside America. So political cost for Trump in midterm elections, vis-a-vis Netanyahu's prospects, which are getting burnished after every week that this conflict is prolonged. These are two contradictory goals, and how United States resolves this contradiction in the interest of its own politics, that is the pearl of high price that U.S. Political leadership has to chase.